What would the orang pendek look like if it was a type of bipedal orangutan? Let's rebuild an orang pendek based on a photo of a living orangutan. So a lot of theories about the orang pendek suggest that it is a type of bipedal orangutan. This doesn't mean that orangutans proper, so Pongo abellii it would be if it's on Sumatra, that doesn't mean that that specific species evolved to be fully bipedal. That suggests that the orang pendek shared a common ancestor with the orangutan. So it is part of that Ponginae subfamily which orangutans belong to. I thought it would be an interesting thought experiment to recreate an image of an orang pendek based on an image of an orangutan. This by no means is scientific, it's more of just a thought experiment. It's more of just scientific curiosity. Can we get an image of an orang pendek that's based on eyewitness descriptions from an image of an orangutan? My theory was that the orang pendek is in the same lineage as gibbons, the Hylobattidae lineage. That doesn't mean that the orang pendek is a gibbon, it just means that it shared a last common ancestor with gibbons. That's my theory. But today, we're going to assume that the orang pendek is part of the orangutan lineage. On my next video, I will do this exact thing, but using a gibbon as a model to recreate an image of the orang pendek. What I need to do is get an image of an orangutan. I'm going to use this image. It's basically standing upright already. That makes it a little bit easier. And it is facing forward. I will say that although the orang pendek eyewitness descriptions are quite consistent, there are some differences between descriptions. Now, this doesn't suggest that the eyewitness descriptions are inaccurate or aren't true. You could get 50 people in a room to describe an orangutan, for example, an animal that most people have seen numerous photos of and are very familiar with. And out of those 50 descriptions, there will be differences. The big descriptions and the main descriptions of the orangutan would be pretty consistent throughout the 50 people, but there will be some minor differences. This is just inevitable. So an animal like an orang pendek, where there are far less eyewitnesses, and most of these witnesses have only seen this animal once in their lifetime, it is very safe to assume that there will be some differences between the eyewitness descriptions. But as a whole, the descriptions are quite consistent. Just a side note, I am no Photoshop expert at all. I'm using super primitive pic collage and airbrush techniques here. I am not a software guy or a technology guy at all. So this is purely just primitive software that I'm using, and I'll do my best. It's gonna look a little crude, I promise you that. Let's get rid of its legs. Let's do something about the arms. The arms are looking pretty orangutan-like, and so are the hands. So we're going to, let's make them a little bit shorter. Although descriptions do say it has, somewhat long arms, they don't hang as long as an orangutan's. So we're going to make them shorter. So let's make this bipedal. Let's individualize those legs. So cut them off, and we're going to make them straight. The orang pendek is an obligate biped, which means it has evolved to be bipedal. So the legs will be straight. They won't be bowed like that. We've all seen apes walk bipedally, and their legs are always bowed, and they're always doing stuff with their hands as they walk. This one will not. Okay. So we'll straighten those legs up and reattach them to the torso of the orangutan. Regarding the feet, the interesting thing with orang pendek is There are reports of its feet being similar to a human's, just shorter and a little bit more broad, but a lot of the footprint casts of the orang pendek show that divergent hallux, that divergent big toe, which is a grasping mechanism for the great apes. So I am going to leave the divergent hallux on the orang pendek, but not this one, because these feet look too orangutan-like. So I'm going to try find feet that kind of match the footprint casts, especially the footprint cast that I found when I was in Sumatra looking for the orang pendek. So basically I'm just going to get a costume ape foot and attach it as the orang pendek's foot. They look good enough. Let's chuck them on. All right. Yeah, that'll work. And I'll airbrush that in. It's the closest thing I can find. Again, this is going to look crude, but at the end of it, hopefully we get an image that resembles an orang pendek. Although it is an obligate biped, that doesn't necessarily mean it will lose that divergent hallux. If it does spend a lot of time in the trees, it may still retain that. Much like Ardipithecus, which is kind of back and forth whether or not it is part of the hominin lineage. It was probably just before Australopithecus, and Australopithecus might have speciated from Ardipithecus. But basically Ardipithecus was an upright walking ape that still retained that grasping big toe. So that kind of can give us hope that just because it walks bipedally doesn't mean it's going to lose that divergent hallux. All right, that's looking pretty good. Okay. Now next, because it is bipedal, it would have a waist. It would have hips, much like a human being's. So we got to suck that gut in and give it a waist. Give it a waistline. And descriptions do say that the orang pendek is quite broad at the shoulders. It has sort of not narrow hips, but narrower hips. But because people report those broad shoulders, that would assume that the shoulders are wider than its trunk. So we're going to give it broad shoulders. Let's get it jacked, baby. Yeah, that's looking all right. Let's give it some nice delts. Let's make it buff. The descriptions say that it's very well built, much like a boxer. You know, it has its head sort of sunken down on its shoulders. Doesn't really have a neck. It's got, you know, big wide clavicles. It's very well built. A lot of people say that it is pretty intimidating looking. Yeah, that's looking good. It's like we're feeding him growth hormone as we speak. Yeah, man, it is hot up here. Jesus Christ, it's like 100 degrees up in this room. Now, if it's part of the orangutan lineage, it would have dark skin, and descriptions do say that the skin that is visible on the orang pendek is quite dark, almost black. We still want to retain its orangey fur. Some of the descriptions do say it's got a sort of chestnutty colored hair. So we will keep that hair, and obviously we are making this image based off an orangutan, so we don't want to completely un-orangutanize it. That's a word I just made up. You can use it if you want. Now, the head. Most of the eyewitness descriptions describe the orang pendek as not having a conical shaped head. So if you look at Bigfoot, he has a very cone-shaped head. That would suggest it has a sagittal crest. That isn't the case for most of the reports of the orang pendek. The orang pendek is described as having a more dome-shaped head, much like a human's. So for example, this is a Homo erectus skull. And if you look, it has no sagittal crest. It's somewhat human-like. It does have a very prominent brow, but no sagittal crest. And in actual fact, the orang pendek, given its size, wouldn't be much smaller than this Homo erectus. Maybe 20% smaller than this, opposed to something like, so this is a mountain gorilla skull. These are replicas, by the way. Look at the size of that sagittal crest. These are to house giant temporalis muscles. And the temporalis muscles spread to muscles down the side of the jaw that is used for mastication. That's mastication, not anything else. And that is chewing. So gorillas spend most of their day chewing grass, chewing bark, chewing pith, very tough vegetation. So they need those gigantic temporalis muscles. And on the males, the sagittal crest is also a display factor. It's used to intimidate other males and also for sexual selection for the females. So if you look at the gorilla versus Homo erectus, the gorilla is far bigger, it's got a sagittal crest. So let's pretend that is orang pendek. You can see the difference. And we're building more of a Homo erectus skull opposed to a great ape skull. So we're gonna make the head more dome shaped. There we go. Basically, we're trying to make it look a little less ape-like. The orang pendek looks more like a relic hominin rather than a ape, like a great ape. Although, you know, relic hominins like Australopithecus, human beings, Homo erectus are still apes. They're in the family Hominidae. They are in the hominin subfamily Homininae. Orangutan isn't in that subfamily. It is in the subfamily Ponginae. And that's what we're assuming in this video the orang pendek is in. It's basically looking okay so far, but we want to make some changes to the face. We want to give it more prominent cheekbones. We want to give it a slightly smaller mouth and get rid of that sort of Homer Simpson type mouth that this orangutan has. And also, we're going to do something about those eyes. We want those eyes to look a little bit more, I hate to say it, but a little bit more sentient, even though that isn't the right word, because if you look into an orangutan's eyes, they are certainly sentient, but we want to make the whites a little bit more prominent, which in humans evolved so we can see more personality. We can get more facial cues when you can see the whites of the eyes. Descriptions say that the face is quite dark, and also the eyes kind of dart around analyzing things. So we're going to darken the skin around the face. We're also going to make the face more round. Let's make that nose more broad, a little bit more wider. It's not described as being super wide, but definitely not in any way snout-like. Alrighty. Now the hair. The hair does vary somewhat, the hair on the head. It's sometimes described as being kind of parted to where the orang pendek looks like it's almost got bangs. The Dutch colonist descriptions describe the orang pendek as having like long hair that went somewhat past the shoulders, but what's more common is basically just either slick back or falling on the outside of the face and kind of shoulder length blending in with the rest of the animal's hair. So we are going to give it a little hairdo. It's looking all right. That's looking like an orang pendek. If I saw that walking through the forests of Sumatra, I would say, yeah, that's an orang pendek rather than an orangutan, that's for sure. Or I would say that's Dave Mustaine from Megadeth walking through the jungles of West Sumatra for some reason. Doesn't it look like Dave Mustaine from Megadeth? Oh gosh. That is an orang pendek created from an image of an orangutan based off eyewitness descriptions. It's weird, if you Google orang pendek images, it's so hard to get any two created images that look alike. This one I despise the most, and it's used all the time. I don't know, there's something about this image that bugs me. It's like, it's got a little pot belly, it's got thin limbs. It doesn't look like the descriptions of an orang pendek. It's not a well-built, staunch, boxer-looking, intimidating animal. It looks like, I don't know, an ape version of Jar Jar Binks. So this is an orang pendek. Let's put it on some jungle backgrounds just so we can see it in its native environment and what it might look like wandering through the jungles of West Sumatra. Yeah, look at that. I mean, that looks like an orang pendek. That looks like something you would see wandering through the jungles, wouldn't it? That'd be pretty cool. This is my dream, to see this in the wild, and I am going to work my hardest towards seeing this and proving that this is real. Now, although I don't necessarily think the orang pendek is from the orangutan lineage, I am a believer that it is more of the gibbon lineage, which I'm looking forward to recreating the orang pendek based off a gibbon. This still is very believable. It looks like an upright walking ape. It matches a lot of the descriptions that the eyewitnesses report. Being put in a jungle, it looks like something that is at home walking bipedally through this environment. Again, this is just a thought experiment. This is just my curiosity, and I want to share that curiosity with you. But what do you think? Do you think this looks like an orang pendek? What you picture in your head an orang pendek looking like, is this what it looked like? I wish I did this ages ago. I wish I created this image using an orangutan as a model, and I also wish I created an image of orang pendek using a gibbon as an image and showed it to some of the eyewitnesses when I was in Sumatra. Actually, I'm going to incorporate this and show some eyewitnesses on my next orang pendek expedition, which hopefully will be pretty soon. But anyway, let me know what you think, and I will see you on the next video when I do this again using a gibbon. Take care, everyone. I'll see you next time on another Thorns Jungle.